We are talking Conjuring the Beyond, and this one is directed and written by Calvin Maury McCarthy. I've actually reviewed a few films from Calvin Maury McCarthy before, and this, of course, is his latest. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking this is a kind of entering a particular kind of franchise. Even the kind of the font looks a little similar, but it isn't. It's a independent movie that just happens to be called The Conjuring something. But it's really nothing like those Conjuring movies. It's actually a sleep paralysis movie, and there have actually been a surprising amount of kind of sleep paralysis movies over the last few years, and this is but another. What is the story, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you. It focuses on a small sleep study with kind of 4 volunteers, all of who don't actually have any problems sleeping, but a doctor want to try and induce sleep paralysis, so therefore he can try and reverse what he's actually kind of done to therefore almost find a cure for sleep paralysis. You know, a fairly kind of good synopsis, I think, and a kind of like a, you know, at least, you know, in the movie, a kind of credible kind of reason for having these kind of people there. So he invites them to a secluded remote medical facility, of course takes away all their phones and things like that, so they don't kind of like get distracted, etc. And of course, this process in kind of inducing sleep paralysis, he invites this otherworldly presence known as the Hag, which has been long associated with sleep paralysis. And of course, this demonic Hag has kind of sort of malicious intent, you might say. And people start going missing. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Conjuring the Beyond. So with kind of a lower budget movie in mind, we have to kind of have certain expectations about what we can expect in regards to spectacle and kind of set pieces and stuff like that. So, but what I will say is I feel this movie, compared to at least the ones that I've seen, seems to be a little bit more kind of more produced, if that makes sense. A little bit more professional looking than some of the others. A little bit more put together, a little bit more sheen on it in a certain degree. Even though it still has clearly a very low budget and still feels very much like an indie production, it does feel like a more confident film in regards to its editing and kind of directorial style here. So I definitely see forward momentum in the kind of the directorial skills of this particular director. So that's all pretty good. I thought the movie takes a little bit of a while to get started, and we'll come on to that again. But once it does, which is around the halfway mark, and we get our kind of our first night, if you like, our first kind of sleep study session, and that's when things start to go a little bit kind of wrong and a little bit kind of scary. And I have to say, I actually quite like the concept here of all of these kind of volunteers having the kind of the same kind of dream, and then kind of like experiencing this like a shared kind of nightmare almost. You know, having to kind of like piece together what they've kind of can remember for it, and obviously kind of we have some of a mystery in regards to what's actually kind of going on. And then of course we have this this old hag, this kind of demon, a witch sort of type character who is present. And now the door is open, it wants a piece. So I actually quite like the concepts of this, and I have to say those sequences, certainly for the budget, I have to say were quite effective. And the makeup isn't overdone, but I think it's effective enough for a kind of a lower budget movie. There are some kind of creepy sequences that I think are plussed by, you know, some good sound design and kind of like editing and sequences involving those kind of like, you know, those sort of creature and the kind of like the whole people getting kind of frozen in bed while something's kind of crawling around them. I thought it was quite good. Now those sequences were quite well done. The cast is relatively small, so I feel you get to know the characters a fairly well. I mean, there's not that many of them. I actually quite liked our Doctor. I actually thought he came across as quite a kind of a personable Doctor. So very, you know, in some of these kind of movies, the Doctors are very kind of aloof and, you know, they seem kind of unnecessarily kind of strict and things like this. This guy, I felt, he came across as a lot more of just a standard, regular human being, having very much kind of small talk with our kind of our volunteers, which kind of made the kind of the feeling a little bit more intimate between this kind of group of people. And I'm sure that's probably what you know, real sleep studies are like. They're probably not quite as, you know, the interactions between the doctor and patient are probably not as scientific maybe as people may think, and it's a little bit more personable, trying to kind of put people at ease. So I actually kind of quite liked that. I think our main character as well, Wanda, I kept thinking of Marvel with that, but you know, I thought she was, you know, a fairly good kind of leading lady, quite kind of innocent and kind of like, quite young looking, I have to say. She's going to be divorcee, but I was thinking, Jesus, she looks about 15, but apparently no. But you know, she seemed like quite personable and quite a vulnerable kind of character. But you know, I thought her backstory was kind of interesting, but not overbearing, which was quite good. So it's an interesting subject, I have to say. It was an intriguing setup, and you know, I quite like the idea of some of the kind of the concepts that were explored within the movie. So what doesn't work? The main issue I think with this one is that it just takes too long to get going. We literally have, outside of this kind of like little prologue at the beginning, we have half the movie where it's essentially looking at a therapy session. And some of the characters, although they are distinct, they are stereotypes. You know, you've got the kind of like the slutty girl, the kind of like the hick guy, that sort of thing, and of course the hick guy who doesn't get much dialogue, so you know he's going to be the first one to go. Things like this. So there are kind of like plenty of stereotypes here, and obvious kind of like, well, who's the cannon fodder kind of situations here. So it's a little bit dull, I have to say, that kind of first half, and there's just a lot of, because there's no real horror elements in that first half outside of the kind of the prologue. I think it would have been better to have like the bulk of the kind of the horror stuff happen on the second night, and maybe have a first night or something where it's a little bit more subdued and it's just kind of like hinting at maybe what's going on. But instead it just has it pretty much all happen on this kind of like the first session. But we have half a movie to get there, and it's just lots of people talking in a room, which isn't particularly kind of, you know, all that interesting. I think it's meant to deepen the kind of the mystery and kind of give us some kind of backstory on these characters, but it was too much of literally just people talking in a room, talking about psychotherapy and stuff like that, with characters who are somewhat of a broad stereotypes. And I've got to be honest with you, the acting was a little bit on the mixed side. I say mixed because I don't think everyone did necessarily a bad job, but it was a little bit hit and miss for me at times. You know, everyone was fair, I would say, but some of the kind of sequences I felt were worse than others. Let's just kind of say that. But certainly I wouldn't say bad, but mixed acting. It's kind of the fairest way I can kind of say that. So the budget does show through when we do get our kind of our more sort of spooky scenes. I'm forgiving for that because I understand it's a low budget. There's only kind of certain things, but you know, we have our hag with kind of like long fingers and they kind of have a bit rubbery. You know, like I said, maybe I'll point it out, but I'm not going to judge it too harshly for that. I've got to say, I think the actual horror elements were handled fairly well, but yeah, you can still see kind of some of the budgetary restraints here. And I gotta say, I think the ending was a little misjudged. Again, I'm not gonna say what that is, but to me it was kind of like, oh, that was a choice. A choice I don't know was the right one, but there you go. So it's a little bit of a slow film, but I feel once it gets starting, it's an interesting kind of movie in regards to that. But it's, can you get through that first half? I think that the horror needed to be peppered in a little bit more, maybe a little bit subtly, but yeah, it was kind of a little bit of a tough sit through that first half, I won't lie. But overall, I still say this is a watchable movie if you kind of like the subjects of sleep paralysis movies. Nothing really like the Conjuring movies, but I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I thought it was somewhat kind of watchable, if not particularly necessarily one you'd maybe re-watch loads of times, but I thought it was a good one-time watch for me. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.